Good evening. I would like to call to order the inaugural meeting of the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee for the Town of Lincoln for January 14th, 2019. I'd like to call the Community Services and Infrastructure meeting of January 14th to order. And begin with a reading a safety notice. In the event of emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given by the clerk. If assistance is required, please see the clerk. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of the town hall. Also, the Town of Lincoln Committee and council meetings are posted on YouTube channel. I would like to thank the public for attending this meeting this evening, and I just want to remind everyone of our rules of engagement, to please be respectful while others are speaking, and please refrain from clapping. Delegations will have 5 minutes to speak, and they are asked to stay focused on the agenda item. Please remember to silence all cellular devices. Roll call this evening, we have all of council. To the far left, Councillor Reimer, Councillor Timmers, Councillor Michalak, and Councillor McPherson. On my far right, Councillor Russell, Councillor Rinjima, Mayor Sandra Easton, and Councillor Pachariva. We have our CAO to my left, and we have most of senior management from both the construction, community services and infrastructure with us this evening. At this time, I would like to please note that the order of agenda has been amended this evening. Item 5.1, the staff presentation regarding the Town of Lincoln Museum and Cultural Center Development Project update, will be considered after item 7.1 on the regular agenda, with all regular agenda items following that. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we will move right into our first delegation. We have one this evening. I would ask council to please give us a little bit of latitude or leeway with our 5-minute rule. We do have the region here, and this is a subject matter which is we've received quite a bit of inquiries and concerns with over the last 2 weeks, and we've been sharing that information. So not so much about the subject matter that's being presented, but just in terms of you know, the whole subject of garbage and pickup. So I just wanted to extend a little bit of leeway so that our representatives can completely articulate what we need to hear tonight. So our first delegation is Catherine Habermill, Director of Waste Management, Public Works, and Brad Whitelaw, Waste Management Policy and Program Manager from the Niagara region, presenting on waste collection service level options and stakeholder consultation results. Good evening.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and committee members and members of the audience and senior staff that are present this evening. Mr. Chair, you did comment that we are here to talk about service levels, but I'm happy to address any questions about service over the last 2 weeks after the presentation.
Thank you, Catherine.
And thank you for the additional time, because I actually started panicking when you said 5 minutes. So we do have a number of slides in our deck. However, Brad Whitelaw, who's with me as well, Brad's been the project lead on this on the consultation process. We will skip through several of them, but they are there in your package to reference and for your information. So just by way of background to set the context, I'll just go through this slide quickly. So the region's current contract expires in March of 2021, and therefore our new contract would start at that time. We are seeking input from various stakeholders on the service options that we've presented. We've talked to various stakeholders, and again, I won't go through that list. I do want to make a comment that no decision on the proposed collection options will be made until we report back to committee in March of this year. So in terms of looking at options, we consider the following reasons. We want to increase participation in our diversion programs. We wanted to look at potential cost avoidance. We also looked at the data that we have to date, so factual data. So we collect data on, we undertake audits, curbside audits every 2 years and look actually at what people are putting out at the curb. We also looked at best practices and major trends in 13 comparative municipalities. We wanted to improve communication to residents and businesses, and we also wanted to standardize the container limits for garbage across various sectors in Niagara. So looking at the options, the first one is every other week garbage collection for the residential sector and those in industrial, commercial, and institutional and mixed-use properties outside the designated business areas as a base service. And I do want to reiterate this point because I know there's some confusion out there across Niagara that under this scenario, we would continue to provide weekly collection of recycling and organics, and that garbage container limits would double for all properties under the scenario of every other week garbage collection. We also looked at mandatory use of clear bags for garbage for all sectors inside and outside the Downtown Business Association. We did not recommend this for implementation, but when we took our report through to the Region's Public Works Committee last Tuesday, they had requested that this option be integrated back into the options to be included in the RFP. So key drivers for every other week garbage, extend existing site capacity, contract cost avoidance with every other week garbage collection, and also increase participation and capture rates in our diversion programs. We know from our results in an average garbage bag in the region that 50% of that garbage bag is organic material, 14% is recyclables, leaving only 36% of what really should be going to landfill. And I also want to comment, it's not on the slide here, that on average, residents are putting out less than one bag a week, and it still contains 64% of material that could be diverted through the diversion programs. Other municipalities that have implemented every other week, there's been several, but it does increase waste diversion when we look at Peel, 6%, and Durham, 16%. And contract savings have been realized between the range of $200,000 a year in Barrie up to $12 million in Peel region. The next option that we were consulting on was the establishment of a 4-item pickup. This is for when you call to have large household items picked up. Right now, it's a take-all service. When we look at our data, we know that 92% of the bookings that we receive for this service, they're only putting out 4 items. So by limiting it, and everyone knows it's limited, the contractor can actually utilize their resources much better. The other option was discontinuing of appliances and scrap metal for low-density properties. And when you'll realize in waste management there's a lot of acronyms, so I apologize if I'm skipping over them. But LDRs is low-density residential, which means single family up to 6 units in a residential property. The reason that we recommended this was that we've seen the tonnage for white goods and appliances decrease significantly since 2007. Only 6% of the properties out there are using this service, and by the time the contractor gets to these properties who actually book the service, the materials are gone. There's also alternatives to get rid of this material for residents. They can drive it to a facility free of charge, or they can contact someone who will typically come and pick it up at no charge. Moving into the IC&I and mixed-use properties, we are recommending that we change the garbage limit from 7 to 4 as a base service. And we're also recommending that we change the weekly garbage limit for mixed-use properties outside designated business areas from 6 to 4. And that really aligns to what the industrial and commercial properties are getting right now. They're currently receiving 4. And again, when we look at the data, we know that these properties are putting out approximately 2 bags per week. That's just a map of the DBAs. So the next slides, there's a lot of numbers here. I'm just going to focus on a couple of the numbers. Again, what I want to highlight here is that the number of containers set out for garbage is well below the limit at 2. And you can see that the organics program, that only 17% of the properties are utilizing this service. Again, looking at mixed-use properties inside the Lincoln DBA, again, number of garbage containers set out per collection is around 2. Just over half are using the recycling program and only 19% using the organics. Mixed use outside DBAs, again, 1.6 containers out for garbage, 27% are utilizing the organics. The point is that there's opportunity to increase the amount of material being diverted from our landfills into programs such as the green bin and the blue and gray box, where those materials can be utilized and have higher value. So I talked about base, and I apologize. Base service is really service that's provided across the region to all sectors, same service. Enhanced services are services that are requested by the local area municipality and paid for by the area municipality. The town of Lincoln's cost for enhanced services is about 1.5 million. Sorry, I just skipped. And that really is just to service, we provide front-end garbage containers to various locations, some municipal. Do we have apartments, Brad, in Lincoln? No, just municipal facilities that we service with front-end. So I'm just going to turn it over to Brad now, who's going to talk a little bit about the stakeholder consultation engagement process.
Thanks, Catherine. So in the spirit of time, what I'll do is there's a lot of information on these slides here, so I'm just, for your information, you already have them there. The region did do an extensive stakeholder consultation with various groups, the municipalities themselves, organizations representing businesses like your BIAs, the Chambers of Commerce and that, so I won't go into great detail on these slides, but essentially we've done a consultation with the various groups there. We also considered the opinions of the residents and businesses there, so we've done an extensive consultation with residents and businesses, so everything from public open houses to online surveys, everything trying to get their information with what they were interested in. As far as the surveys themselves, we conducted surveys of residential and business groups and multi-residential. The region received just over 6,600 responses to its online survey, which is a record for the regional surveys that we've had. So there's a lot of interest, as you can imagine, in waste management. And I've got some of the results here, so I'll try to, for brevity's sake, I'll go through those results as quickly as I can. The region also did telephone surveys. The random telephone surveys that we did were across all municipalities, equally being represented, as well as we looked at the comments that people provided through social media and other there. As far as the very preliminary results, every other week garbage collection was fairly even split across the region. What we also found from that is it was just a little bit less than half of the property households that were surveyed, as well as there were in support of every other week garbage collection. When you look at Lincoln, Lincoln was actually a little bit more in support of every other week garbage collection from the households that we did contact. The businesses themselves, inside the DBAs, they would still be getting weekly garbage collection as opposed to every other week. So it's only those businesses that are outside of a DBA that were being considered for every other week garbage collection. They did express the concern with going with that, which is why we looked at that. The mandatory use of clear garbage bags, there was some support, but as Catherine mentioned, we weren't recommending it as part of the report, but it wasn't in that. That was one of the ones that was just under 40% being supported, both from the town of Lincoln residents as we found from region as a whole. The 4-item limit for residential collection for large items, there was a significant support from both at a regional level and as a town of Lincoln. There was over 90% of the households that were surveyed that were in support of implementing a limit on the number of large item collections, as well as the same thing with regards to eliminating white goods and scrap metal collection for that. So they did not find that there was going to be a great impact on that. The reduction in the container limits for that, so these next couple slides here, as I mentioned, pertain to the business sector. Their opportunity for input from the businesses themselves was through the online survey. They weren't part of the telephone surveys. So we've got the percentages in there. There was a slight majority of businesses there that felt that they could manage a reduction from the 7 to the 4, just at 58%. But less than half felt that there would be a significant impact on their business or property. So that's one of the reasons that we looked at that. The reduction of the enhanced collection frequency for businesses, there was a very small number of businesses that did respond, but generally speaking, there was largely an agreement with regards to that. And as far as the container limits for the mixed-use properties outside the DBAs, about 1/3 felt that they could manage the reduction from 6 to 4 properties, and 60% of those felt that there'd be an impact on their business. As far as the potential collection contract changes, there's a few other ones that we are proposing that we did go out for consultation, one of which is providing an additional 4 weeks of dedicated leaf and yard waste collection in the spring and fall seasons to urban areas, as well as eliminating, excuse me, my apologies, the elimination of the current restriction on regional curbside collection for IC9 properties outside DBAs. Currently, if they have private garbage collection, they're not eligible to utilize the region's collection service. We'd be proposing to eliminate that, provided that they're using the region's diversion program, so the recycling and the organics collection program to qualify for that. The third one that we're looking at is the provision of an enhanced large item collection service for multi-residential and mixed-use properties. Currently, this service is only provided, as Catherine mentioned, to LDR or low-density residential properties. This is one of the things that came back as far as consultation, is these properties are saying, why don't I get this service? So this is one of the ones that we're going out to. So this would be at the direction of each one of the local area municipalities if they want to provide it to their properties in their municipalities. And then what we're looking for from each one of the local area municipalities is their formal input. Ideally, we'd like it by February 1st. We've extended that to February 20th. So as part of that, what we would like is your comments or your positions on the proposed base collection options that we've presented tonight, as well as verification of the current or additional enhanced collection services that you currently receive, as well as the provision of the enhanced collection service for the large items for the multi-residential and mixed-use properties, as well as a verification of your local area municipality would like to provide a per-stop price for the region to include that as part of in-ground public space recycling and litter bins for IC&I multi-residential and mixed-use properties as an enhanced service, again, as a provisional item for that. So at this time, we would entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Habermel and Mr. Whitelaw. Are there any questions from council? Councilor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, thank you for the presentation. I think there's some great ideas in there. I happen to sit on the Niagara Road 12 landfill site committee last term, and got the numbers on recycling, and I think if we can promote recycling and get more people doing it, I think we're pretty good out in this area, but if we can get more people doing, that's great. I do have a question on the DBAs. And on your slide there, two areas that I don't see on there. One is Ontario Street, Beamsville, if you're just going along King Street, and the other is the Jordan Village. And are those classified as DBAs?
Through the chair to the councillor, thank you for the question. So we use the information that we had in our current contract. We are trying to connect with the Jordan Merchant Association.
Okay.
But if there's changes to these areas, then we would look to Lincoln to advise us.
Okay, sounds reasonable. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next up, we have Councilor Pachariva.
Thanks, Chair Bernay.
Sorry.
Still learning our new process. We'll come back to Councilor Pachariva. Councilor Russell.
Thank you, Chair Bernay. I see that we have a range in here for potential contract savings. Do you have anything a little more concrete or a range specifically for Niagara if this was implemented? What kind of a savings we could expect year to year?
Through the chair to the councillor. So what I can tell you is that in the last RFP that we issued back in 2009, we did ask for two options for the weekly garbage collection and every other week. And we saw a savings there about 1.2 million annually. I can also tell you, looking at Regional Waterloo, which is the most recent example of a region that's implemented every other week, they were around $1.5 million annually of savings or cost avoidance.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilor Pachariva.
Thank you, Chair Bernay. I'd like to take this opportunity to personally thank Catherine for her due diligence after our first 2 weeks of the new waste collector in the town of Lincoln. We had some hiccups, to put it mildly, and through our new regional councillor, Rob Foster, he provided Catherine's information, and she was not one to shy away from problems. She faced them head on, and they were looked after the next day. So I take my hat off to you, and thank you very much. Couple questions. With respect to the 50% still of organic materials that we're finding in residential waste, and it's less than a bag, typically what kind of materials are those?
Through the chair, so it's your typical food waste, so leftovers.
Really?
Food that might have expired, and so they've tossed it, fruit peelings, vegetable peelings. I don't know, Brad, if you have anything else to add to that.
Okay.
So typical material that can go into the green bin.
Yeah. Okay, I find that puzzling, why people aren't using their green bins. Another question with respect to collection and diversion. Wondering why we're not tackling the ICI yet, because that typically tends to be the most problematic, is that, everything just goes down the garbage chute in to the bin, that there seems to be no diversion there, or is it going to be a stepped approach where we get greater diversion from the residential, knowing the ICI is a bigger problem?
Through the chair, so you've said it correctly, like the IC&I sector is very difficult, and we have focused for the last few years on the residential sector. It's our largest sector that we service, but some of the changes that we are recommending here will and hopefully increase diversion from that sector that you're speaking of and that you referenced. We know that there is a lot of opportunity in that sector for further diversion, particularly in restaurants, like from the organic material being diverted. So if I can just go through the slide here, if I can find it. So here on this slide, we're recommending some changes to the garbage containers in those sectors that you're talking about, the IC&I and the mixed use.
Okay.
And if I can also, recently, about a year ago, the region did implement a take-all service for organics and recyclables from the commercial sector.
Okay. May I continue, Chair? Thank you. Last year at AMO in Ottawa, because part of the problem we experience in residential neighborhoods, and even though residents are asked to put their recycling out at 7 a.m., some put it out the night before, we tend to have a high wind, and it's all over the neighborhood. So last year we saw covers, whether they were hard covers or like a mesh cover as a top for the recyclables. And I know that on the region's website, they recommend putting one inside the other, but still, at some point, they're overflowing. Any thoughts of providing covers for the recycling containers?
Through the chair to the councillor, so we have looked at this in the past.
Okay.
There has been a challenge with finding a cover that's universal because our bins are purchased from different vendors depending on the price at the time of procurement. But we are continuing to look at that. We know there's a local company that has a lid that seems to be a little more universal, and so we'll be meeting with them in the next few weeks. We know that it's an issue. We hear that from residents. We have been asked the question about why aren't you going to a cart-based program like you see in Toronto or Halton. Currently there are, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but currently there's a lot of changes that are potentially going to happen at the provincial level where it may take municipalities out of the business of collecting recyclables and processing them. So we didn't want to make a huge investment in that type of container if we're not going to be in the business because it is quite expensive for capital. Peel, and I'll let Brad talk to the expense, but capital, and then also maintenance, the cost to maintain those carts. So Brad, I think you have some numbers.
As far as the Peel program, they were looking at over $4 million just in capital for it, plus another $1 million or so per year in replacement costs and that for the capital. So that's a significant amount just for the capital of the carts themselves.
Okay, and my last one, and a follow-up to that, because as I travel around, and I mean, I did a paper in university on the old Park Road landfill site, so garbage and water and wastewater are near and dear to my heart. I know that that's kind of weird, but that's just me. But as I travel around, those large bins, Listowel, Wingham, things like that, wondering, that they use them, but the trucks that they use are automated where there's only one person. So wondering if through the contract that's given to the waste collector, if the cost savings on having the specialized truck with one person might help offset the increase in the capital, if everything stays constant and there isn't any changes with recycling and garbage. But I think that they do that up that area, the every other week, and it's the large container that's wheeled to the end and the arm comes up, and just because knowing that with the increase in minimum wage, that seemed to be the touch point of the manpower to actually to do the job.
Through the chair, so those were the carts we were just talking about in terms of
Yeah.
investment, and at this point, staff aren't recommending that option because of the pending changes at the provincial level. Waterloo, who implemented every other week garbage collection in 2017, they kept status quo, so they have the curbside blue boxes and the green bins similar to us, and their residents have adapted to that change with little issues. So I can share that with you, and I think Waterloo is comparable to Niagara when you look at the makeup and composition of Waterloo.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Brunei. I was going to talk also about blowing recycling. We had an incredible amount of concerns coming forward from a particular community in Ward 1. It was just constant. Every garbage day, or every windy garbage day, just a cyclone of garbage or recycling paper blowing everywhere. So I would really encourage you to look at something in the interim until the provincial changes happen, because, there was a lot of good discussion in that community. There was a residents association that had formed at the time, and they went around and communicated with all the different residents and said, it may be a good idea if you can get your recycling into a bag and put that inside the bin, but not everybody's doing that, and it's just incredible the amount of garbage that blows through there. So what you can do in the interim to alleviate that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair Brunei. Through you to the delegation, thank you very much for coming out tonight. My question is around the garbage. So there's been a lot of discussion about it going to every other week, and people are kind of worried. So they're thinking we're going to have this garbage sitting around for a week. We have to keep a bag, and then next week we'll have another bag. But my thought is people will actually have less garbage if it's every other week, because they will get rid of it through compost. Maybe they'll compost more and recycle more. And I'm just wondering if you have any information where this is true. Like, you see that they're not putting out 2 bags. If we go every week, that gradually we get to 1 bag every 2 weeks. Are you seeing that in other municipalities like Waterloo, where you've started the every other week?
So through the chair to the councillor, I'll start off and then I'll hand it off to Brad because he's been talking to the comparative municipalities. The one thing I do want to reiterate is that right now we know that on average there's less than 1 bag being placed to the curb. And I pulled the slide up again because I love this graphic. I think it really tells the story that 50% still of that bag is organics. And to your point, people will not want to hold on to the smelly and the yucky stuff, which is made up of that 50%. So they'll start using their green bin. And the recyclables that remain will go into the blue and gray box. So we have seen overall that there is an increase in diversion in the municipalities who have implemented every other week garbage. And Brad, I don't know if you have numbers that you can share?
Yes, thanks, Heather. Through you, Mr. Chair. Waterloo, we actually just discussed with them today, and they've let us know information. When they implemented every other week garbage collection, their organics increased by 200%. For their first year, they've already, they reported to us today that from GAP, which is the Generally Accepted Principle which is how we measure a diversion rate, they have an 8% increase 1 year on an overall diversion rate. So that's based on the material going out of the garbage stream and then going into the diversion stream. So that's a very significant increase overall.
That's good, so I see that as a real positive. You know, you're going to gradually get that 50% lower and lower and lower, because people will want to get it in the green bin and get it out. So there's just one other question I had. Implementation date, is that February 1st? Did I read that properly?
Through the chair, it would be March 8th, 2021.
Oh, okay. I don't know where I got the February 1st, okay. All right, thank you very
Oh,
much.
sorry, for the comments or the service starting?
For the service starting.
Okay, yes,
Will be March
2021.
2021, okay, so it's a ways off, okay. Perfect, thank you very much.
Councillor, or Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm not touching my device. Thank you very much for coming. I have to say that I haven't heard any concerns raised about your recommendations around the waste collection changing to every other week. However, I certainly have had concerns raised about the large items at the end of residential driveways. And so I want to completely understand what it is that, I not only want to understand why you're doing that just from the numbers, but also I don't see an alternative here. And this is an area that's a big problem as our communities get older. Not everybody has a truck. What is it that you're going to be recommending that people do? This is an issue. I could put my garbage out every 3 weeks and it wouldn't make one bit of difference. It wouldn't be inconvenient at all. But if I'm needing this service, you're not giving me any options. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair to the councillor, or to the mayor, sorry. So there's two options here that we're recommending. So one is the large household item collection. So that's couches, chairs, box springs. So what we're doing is we're limiting it per pickup. So if you want to put out 4 items this week and you have 4 other items, you can book another collection for the following week. It's really to allow the contractor to be able to utilize their resources more effectively. We know that on average, 92% of the bookings are 4 items or less. So we don't see this being a huge impact to residents. And Brad alluded to it in the survey that most respondents didn't see an impact to them because it's a limit per collection day, not an annual limit. And then when we look at the discontinuation of the appliance and scrap metal, again, that's based on the numbers. We're paying right now $130,000 a year for a service that really is not being used by residents. And therefore, we feel that there are alternatives out there, and to your point, Mayor, if they can't drive it anywhere, there are individuals out there who drive around who are willing to pick this material up for free because there is a value. So then they take it to a scrap metal yard where they'll get paid for that material. So there are options. We, a few years back, don't quote me on this, maybe 5 years ago, we discontinued the collection of electronics, so TVs, any type of electronic. And we really did not receive a lot of complaints because residents put it out, it's gone, or they call someone and someone picks it up for free. Because there's value to this material, there are people out there who want it. And so they're willing to come to your house and pick it up.
Okay, so the limit is 4, and it doesn't make any difference what size they are or anything?
That's
You can-
correct.
And you can put it out every week that there is collection, just 4 items. Okay, well, that's not, I didn't read that quite as you've described it, so thank you very much for that. And so are you suggesting that there are companies, through you, Mr. Chair, that actually are out there and that, possibly we could even provide some references for people, or are these names easy to find? I'm just trying to get this point across to make it as easy as possible so that this doesn't become the barrier to the change.
Yeah, and if I can, before I answer the question, and I forgot to mention it earlier, that when we brought this option forward to the Region Public Works Committee, they did recommend, and the motion was amended, that we put in both options in our RFP, that we get a price to discontinue and a price to continue to provide the service. So I forgot to mention that, so I do want to bring that forward now. So I don't know if there's a list handy, but we certainly can do some research and get back to you.
Okay, I think that would be very helpful. Mr. Chairman, the only other thing that I would add, it does tie in with this unintentional littering that goes on when things are blown out of the boxes. It's really, it then becomes an additional cost to the municipalities to keep this garbage picked up as well. And so, have you considered at all supplying clear garbage bags to people who want to use them? We live up on the escarpment. We always use clear plastic bags for blue and gray box, or it would be all over the town. Have you considered that at all, or what is the experience in other communities in regard to controlling the amount of litter that happens?
Through the chair, so we haven't considered providing bags to residents, but we certainly allow them in our system. So that's on our website. If people want to use bags, they can, and we've seen over the years more and more bags coming in. It is a challenge from a processing perspective, because now you have sorters having to rip open the bags, but we understand that it is a need, particularly if
Okay.
you live in an area where it's windy or in the country. They're just easier to use, and obviously we're trying to make it convenient for residents to use that program. We don't like when our blue boxes fall over and things blow out, because that's material has a value, and typically when it's collected, it's just off the streets, it's just thrown into a green garbage bag. So that's a loss of a revenue to us. So as I said, we're meeting with this company that's a local company to talk about lids that can go onto our existing boxes, and we're hoping that we can come up with a solution, because we all know that we're seeing more and more windier days, and it always seems to be on collection day in your area. So we take your comments back. We've heard it from other councillors, we've heard it from residents, so we are looking into it now that we think there may be a viable option to have more of a universal lid that can be used on different boxes.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Michalak.
Through you to the presenters, thank you very much for coming. Just a concern I have, let's say garbage day is Friday and it's every other week, or every other week garbage pickup. What happens if I'm going away Thursday night and garbage day is on Friday, and then I have to wait possibly another 3 weeks to dispose of my garbage? Many people consider garbage pickup to be like the least that the town or the region can do for them. They have no water, they have no sewer, so the convenience of having your garbage picked up at your road is one of the last things that many people in my area consider a service. Is there any possibility of having a remote pickup sites where people, let's say you're going away for the weekend, you can take a bag of garbage without having to drive all the way to Grimsby or up Niagara Falls?
Through the chair, I'll start, and I know Brad, again, has been talking to various municipalities, so he can speak to sort of what their practices are. We haven't considered that. The only option right now for Lincoln residents is to drive to Niagara Road 12, and we would make that available to residents who need to get rid of one bag because they're going away on vacation, and certainly they don't want it sitting around for a few weeks. I know in my neighborhood, we just asked our neighbors to go in and put it out, but I think everyone has keys to houses and stuff, so some people might not have that ability. They may not have a neighbor close to them, so I'll let Brad speak to what other municipalities are doing.
Thanks, Catherine. From the other municipalities that we've talked to that have gone every other week, the only provisions that we've heard are for things like, say, diapers or whatever like that. The city of Barrie put in a thing where residents could drop off diapers and that if they had something like that and they wanted to be able to do that. That was a provision. The city of Barrie Council had a concern with regards to that. I haven't heard anything like Regional Waterloo hasn't implemented anything as far as free tipping fees or anything at their landfill sites to be able to address it. So there hasn't been any other municipalities that have made any other accommodations other than, if residents have a neighbor or whatever that can bring it out for them. But there's none that other of the comparative municipalities that have made any provisions.
The reason why I ask, when I go up north, if I've traveled, you take your own trash to the dumpster, and seems to be no monitoring of it. It seems to be an honor system, and rather than having you know, garbage pickup weekly. It's basically when you feel it's time to take the trash out. So that's one thing. And then is there any concern about animal waste? Is there any track of animal waste? Is it an organic? Is it go in the landfill? Where does animal waste, it seems like everybody in my neighborhood has a dog walking it, and the thing to do is to throw it in the trash can. And on a hot summer day in July, if that can isn't emptied weekly, it could get pretty nasty.
Through you, Mr. Chair, pet waste, you're talking like kitty litter, and animals is acceptable in our green bin program. So, I mean, residents can put that in the green bin should they choose to do so.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
I just had one quick question. I appreciate the presentation, and I'm going to give the last word to our CAO, but just as this is a contract that we're going to look at down the road starting in 2021, and typically, you know, most of the trucks that most providers are using are very large trucks where turning radius sometimes can be problematic. And as we move into the future, you know, we've got developments where we're starting to hear some concerns about large trucks and turning radius, in, as I think a subdivision in Jordan in the Phelps development. But we've got the Prudence development coming on board as we talk about densification and going up and not an area to move out. So is there any look at this contract in terms of having smaller trucks with smaller, you know, obviously it's not an issue in the rural areas, but in the urban areas it's going to become problematic. Is that something that's being looked at in this contract?
Thank you for the question. So right now, staff are looking at our policy. We know that there's been a couple of issues that have come up, particularly in the Lincoln area. You cited one. So we are looking at it. The challenge is when you move to smaller trucks, obviously your costs go up. So it's something that we're trying to balance. For when we look historically, most developers will try to meet our policy and our criteria for on-site collection. There are some that haven't, and so the challenge is when the resident moves in, they find out after the fact now that they have to carry their material to a centralized location. And so I understand that. It is a challenge, but as I said, we are looking at our policy. We've talked to other municipalities who have a similar policy, and there's a working group that's made up of various regions that our staff have been involved in. I think they've had one meeting to date. So we are looking at it. I'm hoping to have some sort of resolution prior to this contract document going out. But again, it's a balance of whether or not we want to pay more for service or try to accommodate those who don't want to or can't meet the criteria.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to give the last word this evening on this to our CEO, Mike Kirkopoulos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just wanted to thank both Catherine and Brad for being here this evening, and I think Catherine did highlight there's been a number of instances over the last couple of years that her and her team have worked with us on to address for our residents. But a little birdie did whisper to me that it is actually Catherine's birthday this evening, and she's here celebrating it with us. So I did want to thank her for being here again this evening, and thanks to the little birdie that did whisper that to me as well.
Thank you very much for not only your presentation, but allowing all the council to ask the questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I do have a letter, if you could indulge me, from your new collection contractor. I just want to read the first part of it. I think we all recognize that there's been some difficulties over the last 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
It feels like
Councillor
two-
Foster is out in the gallery, and he's nodding. 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks.
So if I can, I just want to read. So the company is Canadian Waste Management. Would like to apologize for falling behind on the first week of collection and the second week of collection. In response to this, we have implemented a new collection and routing plan, as well as procurement of additional rental trucks, bringing the equipment total up to 15 trucks on site. And they also say this, along with additional staffing, will ensure more timely collection, and we will continue to make adjustments as we develop a better understanding of the townships of Lincoln and West Lincoln. Again, we would like to apologize for the delays and look forward to servicing the region and the townships in an efficient and professional manner. So I just wanted to share that because I know it's been trying for all of us. Certainly we wanted a bit of a different outcome, but The contractor did experience a high number of breakdowns, 15 hours in one day of breakdowns. So my staff are committed, and I'm committed to working with them and ensuring that the town of Lincoln gets good service.
Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Thank you. We have no consent agenda this evening, and so moving on to our next item on our regular agenda, we are now considering item 7.1, CS 01-19, project update regarding the Action Sports Infrastructure. Staff will be providing a presentation on this topic, along with Trevor Donegan, Adrian Penichetti, and Nick Halkias. Welcome, Sarah.
Good evening, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on this project this evening. Before I start, I'd like to just welcome to council chambers this evening a number of residents who are here in support of this project, who have been involved from various points, some dating back to earlier parts of this century, and some that have recently been engaged in the project. So welcome, and thank you very much for coming this evening. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to provide an information update to council on the progress made during 2018 as it relates to Action Sports amenities, specifically a skate park and pump track. So this evening I will provide some project background. There's quite a bit. I will also define for you what Action Sports are. I will review the recent community engagement that has happened on this project and user feedback. And I'll be joined later in the presentation by my three co-presenters this evening, Nick, Adrian, and Trevor, who would like to share their views on why this is an important project as well. I'll outline some critical success factors, a project timeline, and I will touch on Serena Park as well. Sorry, there's a delay. There we go. So skate and bike parks are now considered a standard level of service in most municipalities, both large and small. They respond to increasing public demand for unstructured, low-cost activities and support physical activity among youth, as well as many adults who grew up skateboarding, inline skating, or BMXing. Action sports are one of the fastest-growing recreational activities in North America. The term action sport describes modern, freestyle, individual sports that involve self-propelled vehicle maneuvering over a course or obstacle. The most common action sports are skateboarding, BMX, freestyle mountain biking, inline skating, snowboarding, and surfing. Participation in these sports has a broad appeal to both youth and young adult, as well as an emerging family market, as adult action sports enthusiasts often draw their children toward the sport. Currently, there are only 3 municipalities in the Niagara region that do not have a skate park, and Lincoln is one of them. The other 2 are Niagara-on-the-Lake and Wainfleet. The next 2 slides are project background of where we've come from to where we are today. At the bottom of both the slides, you'll notice red nodes. Those indicate the year in which other local area municipalities invested in skate park infrastructure. In 1999, the town of Lincoln developed a strategic plan that identified a number of recreation and leisure service gaps in the community and indicated the facilities required to address these needs and that required closer study. One of the gaps in service included the issue of youth having reduced participation options if they did not participate in organized sports. In 2003, the town and the Lincoln Agricultural Society initiated a project to prepare a master plan and implementation strategy to guide enhancements to the Beamsville Fairgrounds. Part of the process included a 3-day consultation with the community. There was an overwhelming interest on the part of many local youth for a skateboard park. They were passionate in their pleas for new play facilities and determined to have their message heard. Following this project, a group of interested youth and adults began to meet to discuss how to turn the vision of a skate park into a reality. The group developed into the Lincoln Uptown Riders Skate Park Association. Advice and guidance was provided by the Community Services Department, and the association's vision was to build a local concrete facility. The park would include components for skateboarding, BMX, biking, and inline skating. The association held several fundraising events. Local service clubs and businesses were approved for financial donations in support of the project. The overwhelming message the association received was to come back to us when the town of Lincoln officially acknowledges and supports the project. In 2005, council acknowledged that a skate park was an identified need and agreed to work in partnership with the association to have the skate park built by 2006. After several motion amendments, council decided the association would be responsible for fundraising the monies required for the build. Fundraising began, but unfortunately the association became inactive in 2006. In 2007, staff hosted a community meeting to discuss and brainstorm opportunities to revive the project and develop a project committee. In 2009, $10,000 was allocated to the development of concept designs, but it was determined to be insufficient and reallocated to other infrastructure projects. In 2013, Convo's Youth Zone reignited the discussion by submitting a petition to council with 243 youth signatures in support of building a skate park. Staff developed an online community survey in 2016 to further gauge interest and demonstrate need. A pump track was added to the scope of the project, recognizing that this new and trendy amenity caters to additional users, and there is an economic benefit to having an all-wheel facility that caters to a broader user group. In 2017, council approved $150,000 for the purchase of a modular park, location to be determined. Through consultation with users early in 2018, it was determined that the desire for a concrete permanent park still existed. Through a staff report last June, a recommendation to purchase a temporary mobile skate park system for interim use was approved. In addition, consultation services to develop a site plan and concept design were approved. Working with a consultant, staff reviewed potential sites for suitability and determined that the green space known as Serena Park, adjacent to the Fleming Center, was the ideal location as it provides a central location with access to public transit for users, washrooms, and parking, as well as the topography of the site was conducive. The skate park project has been identified in a number of capital plans, including the current 10-year capital plan, with target construction of 2019. Staff have prepared a capital budget request for the Phase 1 development of Serena Park for consideration in the 2019 budget deliberations. Currently, there are no pump tracks in the Niagara region. Lincoln would be the first to build this unique recreation amenity. So why is that important? Well, it brings more people into our community, first of all, utilizing our park system, and importantly, spending money at our businesses as well, particularly in downtown Beamsville. There's a possibility to host events and competitions tied to both a skate park and a pump track, which again is a possible revenue generator. And it puts us on the map as a community that cares about quality of life, particularly for our youth. These are some pictures from some recent community engagement in July and August of 2018. Community design workshops were hosted by consultants Canadian Ramp Company and attended by over 80 residents of all ages who expressed interest in the development of action sport amenities. Workshop participants had the opportunity to design their dream amenities and had fulsome conversations about costing and site selection. On Wednesday evening, our master plan consultants, Monteith Brown, will be here to provide an update workshop to council on the progress that's being made with the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan. They are certainly excited to be with you on Wednesday evening to discuss that project, but also to discuss any questions you may have regarding concurrent projects that we're looking at, including our capital requests for 2019. Here is some recent survey data that was provided to us by Monteith Brown. The online survey that was hosted this past fall in 2018 identified that 16% of households have at least one member that's participated in action sports in the last 12 months, but that nearly 50%, if not higher, in all areas, they support future investment. So they support additional spending on amenities like skate parks, pump tracks, et cetera. We also surveyed 427 youth in the last 6 months, youth being those under 18 in the community, using an app that was developed in conjunction with Spark Lincoln to determine what they value in their community and what they want to see more of. The skate park received the highest number of responses for outdoor recreation improvements at 34%, which indicated to us as staff that it's definitely a desired feature among youth residents. Again, on Wednesday evening, Monteith Brown will be here with us and are absolutely prepared to answer any additional questions you may have in terms of how this will relate to our Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan. But they did identify for us that typically skate parks and bike parks rank near the bottom on community surveys because they appeal to a smaller audience. In Lincoln, they actually rated higher than expected. So you will remember, perhaps you saw some pictures on social media, that we did purchase a mobile skate park in 2018. It was located in the Fleming Center for 6 weeks during the summer, in which time we had a ridership of almost 600 participants. While the mobile unit serviced the need of the skateboard community during the interim, staff strongly recommend that this equipment should be considered temporary, as it does have a finite lifespan. While it's provided a minimum level of service to meet temporary needs, the equipment is not recommended for permanent installation in the long term. After the ice was reinstalled in the arena, we had the fortunate opportunity to reach an agreement with DeSantis Homes to use the property adjacent to the Fleming Center to relocate the park for an additional 7 weeks. This is a picture of one of our young users, Wayne, who I actually think is here this evening. Wayne, are you here? Hi, Wayne. Welcome. I didn't recognize you without your helmet on. So Wayne is here, and he was a user of the park, and certainly I think he enjoyed it. Yeah, that's accurate? Okay, good. So unfortunately, we don't have data from the weeks where the skate park was located outside because it was an unsupervised area, but certainly from staff anecdotes, if you will, it was well utilized, particularly obviously after school and on the weekends. This is some parent feedback that we receive via email. It's always really exceptional when we get positive emails from particularly parents. Taking the time to do that is not something that busy parents always have, so we appreciate when we get that feedback. Having the skate park was a great idea this summer, and I hope the arena can be put to similar use next year. So before I invite our guest speakers up this evening, just a couple of words on youth attraction and retention, which is something I think we talk a lot about in communities. Youth attraction and retention is a key concern, particularly in rural municipalities across the country. Many youth migrate out of rural communities for more opportunities in metropolitan areas, and this phenomenon contributes to overall population decline. In 2015, the University of Guelph, in partnership with the town of Goderich, conducted a study exploring strategies for rural youth retention. They found that a lack of social and recreation opportunities are a primary reason that youth choose to leave a community, behind only education and employment. A healthy community has representation from all ages and values all demographics equally. And so now I'd like to introduce Trevor and Nick and Adrian, who are going to come up and in their own words answer these two questions about why this project's important to them and why they think it's important to the community.
Good evening, and thanks for having me. First time speaking at council, and I'm honored to be here tonight. My name's Nick Halkias. I'm a local business owner. I own County Cycle here in Beamsville. We're into 5 years, going into our 6th summer of business. We've got over 3,000 customers in our database, and that's just individuals. We're not talking about also who is in these families as well. So this is a lot of people that we've quickly collected in our database. And I speak for myself and for these people. When we talk about why this project would be important to us, I think we really need a central hub for people to go to in a community. Like, let's pull Lincoln into the future. It's sad to see that we are one of those communities that haven't caught up yet. Niagara-on-the-Lake, I can kind of understand. Wainfleet, I can kind of understand. But as for Lincoln, in its rate of growth, I think it's about time. Public pool, pump track, skate park. It's something that every community needs. Why is it important to the community? I mean, let's just touch on our last feature. You know, in our motto here is belong. Let's give the youth something to belong to. If we don't give them an outlet, where will they go? Other communities, who knows? And let's give them something to belong, and let's bring in people into our community. Let them spend money here. Let them see how wonderful Lincoln is. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Adrian. Yeah, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you guys as well. I think there's a lot of opportunity here in Lincoln to have a pump track and a skate park as well. And even on the tourism side, I've traveled myself to a number of these tracks around from Brockville to Kitchener-Waterloo as far as Brooklyn, New York, because there's really not a lot of opportunities. And to Nick's point, as a pun intended, cycling hub in the area, there's really not a lot of places that a tourist or someone who's interested in cycling the region can come, have a safe place to park, have the amenities of having water and washrooms, and even just a place on the map to say this is a great place to start your journey cycling around Niagara. I noticed on the website that there is a bikeways map still that could probably use some updating here in the town of Lincoln. I think it would be a great place to have a central hub, a place for people to come enjoy the amenities. It's a great opportunity to have youth and adult youth like Nick and I to have an opportunity to do something like this and point for other people to come see it.
Hi everybody, I'm Trevor. I'm a skateboarder myself. I want to thank you guys for having me here. I moved to Beamsville about 2003. I picked up a skateboard when I was first 2 years old, and my dad always took me to the skate park in Grimsby to work on my skills. And when I moved to Beamsville, one of the first things I noticed was there was no skate park, so that was kind of a roadblock for me right there. But as I got to high school, I started meeting a bunch of other skateboarders who was fighting for the exact same cause. And from starting this in 2015, I've learned so much about politics and other stuff, but one of the main things that I learned was how many people and other skateboarders, and not even just skateboarders, but just people who use action sports stuff, have been fighting for this park. So I think having the skate park would not only be a dream come true for me and a dream come true for the other riders, but I think this would be a massive favor and a massive thank you to those who have fought for the skate park longer than I have, because I am not the only one who has fought for this. I've met people who have fought for this before I have, and I think that a great skate park like this, we owe it to those who tried so hard. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. So a few recent comparables and costing for you, just to give you a bird's eye view of what we're looking at. These are some recent skate park only amenities that have been added in communities here in Niagara. You'll see Port Colborne, Pelham, Welland, and most recently West Lincoln. West Lincoln's was just opened last summer in 2018, and it's part of a much larger project, their multi-use recreational site project. So it's a significant investment on that site that they're making. Our proposal is for $560,000 specific for these amenities, which would be a skate park and pump track. So you may ask, when you look at the numbers, how are we getting 17,000 square feet for that number when you can see above that it's sometimes more for less? There's a lot of project considerables when we look at this and cost differentiation. I'll highlight a couple of them. Lighting is one that is a considerable cost. We are not proposing to include lighting in this project if it moves forward. It's upwards of sometimes $100,000, so that's a huge budget factor. Specialized features like colored concrete and additional design work. The skate park in Port Colborne, for example, has a lot of colored concrete. It's also designed in the likeness of a ship to represent the place it has along the canal. while very nice looking, is not something we are looking to do here. We're looking for a basic park. Physical features, so you may see at some skate parks bowl features that dip down and have to be excavated into the ground. Our design proposal that Canadian Ramp Company worked on with the community is all above ground, on surface, an open bowl system, so that significantly reduces the amount of drainage that is required in the design and is a cost savings as well. And we do not have any significant site challenges at Serena Park that we know of right now. A number of these other projects had significant site challenges and required additional geotech surveys and a lot of extra money to be able to navigate those challenges. So their project budgets look a little bit different than ours do, but their projects were all different, and ours is exceptionally unique. So we've been identifying need as staff for almost 15 years between surveys and petitions and consultation with user groups. We've identified the most suitable location in the community as being Serena Park. We do have quite a bit of community support, some of which are here tonight. Unfortunately, not all of them could be here because it's approaching some of their bedtimes, I'm certain. And we thank Council for their support in 2018 with the $150,000 budget. We are looking for additional budget in 2019 to address starting and commencing the design work for Serena Park, which I'll speak to in just a moment. So this is an additional slide I added just to give you a really clear picture of what a proposed timeline would look like. Serena Park development will definitely be a result of high-level recommendations from the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan. We expect that you will see a draft of that in June of this year. We will also do additional community consultations specific to Serena Park. We will do that with every park. The Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan will provide us with some really good guiding principles as well as high-level recommendations. But as we develop new parks and redevelop old parks, we need to consult. This is not something that will stop as soon as we have this master plan in our hands. So I just want to be very forthcoming about our intentions to do that. Staff are absolutely committed to facilitating the project in an informed and responsible manner that's rooted in community engagement. So we're here this evening to inform, to help you make a decision. We know that budget dollars are tight, that you have a lot of considerations to make in the next little while. If you did decide to move forward with Serena Park development for phase 1, staff would be prepared to issue 2 RFP documents in the spring, one for the design, the complete design of Serena Park, and one for the build of the action sports infrastructure. We would need to evaluate those RFPs and complete the reference checks, and we would have to propose the award to you here, 2 proponents most likely, and we would award contracts and expedite project contracts. We would have to go back to the community in the summer of 2019 to engage and refine the entire design for Serena Park. And then in the fall, we would hopefully be able to bring a completed design, a proposed design to you for review, as well as share that with the community. So this is Serena Park as it sits today. It's a nice blank canvas, beautiful space. Just to give you a few numbers so you can wrap your mind around the space, it's a total area of 1.48 hectare or 3.66 acres. Or if you don't speak that language, 159,000 square feet. So a couple numbers there. The reason I share this with you is because our action sports proposal that you have this evening is 17,000 square feet, which represents 9.3% of Serena Park. It is not going to be the entire park, far from it. What do we know about Serena Park right now? We know that the only amenity that's been committed to is the proposed area for the Val Fleming Butterfly Garden. That's a proposal that was brought forth in 2017 and approved by council, so that's the only area at this current time that is spoken for. Staff are definitely proposing the design of the entire park inclusive of the proposed action sports elements, and that be considered during the 2019 budget deliberations. But what else have we heard about this park specifically? Some of these are specific comments, some of them are generic comments we hear about all of our parks, so that we take into consideration. We hear that people want play apparatus, accessible play apparatus for a variety of ages. We hear that people want splash pads. We hear that people want outdoor fitness equipment for adults. We've heard soccer pitches. We've heard shade is very important in all of our parks, so shade structures. Benches, places for people to sit and be comfortable and rest. People would love to see public art, open space for play, and connectivity, so additional routes and paths. And of course, trees. We can never build a park without putting trees in. So we've heard a lot of things already, and we'll continue to get that feedback from the community. Like I said, the engagement on this project is not even close to done. We're really excited to continue to work with the community. So there are some question marks. We do need to do a design for the entire park, and that's something that hopefully we'll be able to do in 2019 with your support. So today's update presentation has been an exercise really in us being duly diligent to provide you with an update on the work we did in 2018 and to inform your decision-making moving forward. So I will end the presentation there, and if you have any questions, Director McKay and I would be happy to address those. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation, and thank you also to Adrian, to Nick, and to Trevor. My screen is starting to light up, so first I'm going to go to Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Adrian called it adult youth. I consider myself at the far end of that spectrum of adult youth. But being a young dad and having kids in a young neighborhood, it's great to see projects like this that get kids out outside, which seems to be very, very difficult, especially nowadays. So I think that's great. I'm glad everybody came in to give the presentation. I'm going to try to keep this away from the capital discussion that might be coming up, but just a quick question on the lighting aspect. So was the, not say removal of lighting, but the absence of lighting a budgetary decision, or is that some from feedback from the community? Was that feedback from specialists? Where would that decision come from?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Russell. The budgetary restriction on lighting was just that. It was a restriction that we felt it was too much of an ask at this point in the project to include that. Our park bylaw right now, currently as it stands, has our parks open and operable during the hours of dawn to dusk, and that's not something we're looking to change. We're also respectful of the fact that this is in a residential neighborhood and we don't want a massive amount of light shining into people's residences. So those were really the factors that, through discussion with the consultant, they've seen it go both ways, lights or no lights. Typically, when there are massive lights erected around these amenities, it's in a more remote location that would allow for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Rinjima.
Thank you, Chair Brune. So the design or the image that's on page 8 of the report that shows where the, well, it's up there as well, but I'm looking sort of at the whole park in this one picture I have, and I have Google Maps up. So when we do the entire park design, we'll decide, I'm assuming, where in the park that's going to be situated. So it's shown there, and can you tell me, is there a particular reason that we're showing it there? Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Jima. This is a concept design, so this has been informed, like I said, by the community in terms of the amenities they want. There's absolutely opportunity to move the location of that when we design out the whole park. The rationale for that was as closest to the Fleming Center side, as far away from the residential area as possible. So we absolutely will be reviewing the positioning of this as we design the entire park. The amenity itself likely would not change, but yes, the positioning could be altered in a favorable manner to both park users and residents.
Okay, so I was curious what the reasoning was for it being there. I see it out by the road directly across from residences, where there may be other places where it might be better to put it, and it's may be able to take some advantage of the existing lighting in the parking lot as well. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, there are a number, it's hard to see in the Google image, but there are a number of light stanchions along that side of the park as well. So that is one of the reasons it was also put over there, although it won't provide the necessary lighting to keep the park active in the evening. It does provide some ambient lighting throughout the park.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair Brunette. Through you, a big thank you to everybody that presented. That was well done. It was a great presentation. I got some excellent feedback from the open houses that were in that late summer, early fall, I think, just from the way they were set up, the fact that the some of the boarders, participants got to I guess get on the computer and kind of fool around with the design, and it was really they really felt they were part of the process. So good job on that. And having a teenager who participates in all those action sports, this is something that we'd have to kick him out of, I think, when it might be too late at night for him being there. Just two questions. Something about the lights, Councillor Russell already talked about, and it's just about parking in this whole area, not so much with this. And I like the design or the thought behind the throwing that stuff down there, all the different components of the park. The last slide that we looked at, and just with conjunction with the arena and all this stuff, I think we want to do more things there. And the reason it might be seasonal too. So when the arena has a lot of parking, maybe there's not quite as many people using this. I don't know. A lot of kids might walk and bike there, obviously that kind of thing. But is there room maybe, or is there? I just see sometimes there might be down the road there might be parking issues there. But maybe you can speak to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Reimer. That'll be something that, again, when we consult with the community, we would expect a number of residents from the Serena Park neighborhood to hopefully attend and engage with us to determine if they have concerns about parking. From a staff perspective, as you mentioned, the activities that happen in the Fleming Center are incredibly seasonal. So from the months of May until the end of August, when we put the ice back in, there is ample parking available, which would align with the key user times for park activities. But absolutely looking at parking as a top priority through the design phase would be something that staff will be focusing on. We hope that children are walking to the park or taking public transit or riding their bike or their board to get here. That is always the hope, but in reality, we have to be prepared for the latter of parking issues.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Timmers.
Ms. Ann, this is a great report, and I don't really have a lot of questions other than the actual picture that we see there. Is that the product? Is that the final design, or is that not complete at this point? I'm not sure. I participated in one of the workshops where we did the cut and paste, and I'm just wondering if this is the result of that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Timmers, that is the proposed design, yes. There may be minor modifications at this point. Staff have provided feedback to Canadian Ramp Company on the design. The design is now our intellectual property, so moving forward, what we want to do with that, depending on if this project is approved and moves forward, we would put an RFP out for the build of that. There may be some slight modifications on drainage, things of that nature, but nothing that would change the actual look and feel of the park. A number of users have reviewed this proposed design and have also provided feedback, and all of that has been revised, and I think that they're quite happy with the end product.
Good, that's very good. I just want to thank everyone that came out tonight and our speakers, and it's an exciting project. I know I heard loud and clear that the youth need something to do in our town, and this is a healthy, active activity to be involved in. I know the U-Link also goes to the Fleming Center on a regular basis, so I think that would be a great way for some of the kids to get to the Fleming Center if they live a little too far out or if they don't have transportation. So that's just one of my thoughts. Anyway, thanks everyone for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation. Mr. Chairman, I want to comment on this report as an example of a really ideal park planning strategy, one that we've been talking about for some time. And, you know, to have, I think what I realized when I first read this report was you don't do this level of planning unless you have staff who have the right skills and you have the information from the community about the job that you want to get done. And so that leads to the town then making the right investment, and whether it's through the budgeting process that includes sponsorships, whatever that source of money is, this is the right process to use. And I felt very comfortable at the end of it, feeling that all of the things that needed to be done were done. And certainly the level of community input, even, and I'll never get the name right, but certainly Sue Foster's here tonight, and one of the Rotarians that was so integral into the original program. All of this has come together very well, so thank you very, very much for all the work that you did. What is the plan then? And again, I know that some of these details will be worked out through the capital budget process, but is it your plan to use this model for the discussion of all park planning going forward? Is this the strategy that we can expect as a council?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the mayor. Yes, absolutely. Staff, I think it's safe to say it's a new era, and we're very excited to continue with our community engagement effort. We have a number of park projects that are top of mind. Obviously, the completion of Prokitch Park. Ashby Park is due for redevelopment, so that'll be another park that staff will be doing engagement and planning on this year. And the Jordan site, Jordan Lions Park, requires a massive amount of planning. So we are ready to hit the ground running on a number of projects in 2019 and moving forward. The only way we are going to be able to inform those decisions and help you make those investments is through good planning. So our Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan will assist with that, but there will be engagement that needs to happen beyond that process as well.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, the skate park equipment that we had in the arena, you know, was certainly there a lot to see the kids involved in that. But I'd like to hear, if you can, you may not be prepared to do this, but the return on investment for that, beyond the happiness quotient, which obviously, I don't know how you put a price on that, but what do you think the return on investment was for that decision?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the mayor. That's a very difficult thing to quantify, but what I can share is that we are very excited to reinstall that skate park apparatus, the mobile unit, in the arena this coming May for an extended season. So 4 months this year instead of 6 weeks, which is what we offered in 2018. We also anticipate that if we are able to build a permanent skate park structure and pump track at the proposed site, that we would relocate that apparatus, the mobile unit, out to Jordan, to the arena out there as a possibility. So that's something that staff are looking at. How do we service all parts of the community with these amenities? So in terms of return on investment, I think you saw some testimonials this evening from individuals. We offered this programming in the Fleming Center free of charge in 2018, and we'll continue to do that into 2019.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 quick questions, and thank you, Sarah, and the rest of the presenters tonight. Question around liability. I know we've talked about liability in the past, and I should say I spent about 45 minutes on the phone with Sarah today with other questions with regards to the whole project, and she answered them very, very well for me. So won't get into all those details, but we didn't talk about liability and specific to a skate park. Can you make any comment on that, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor McPherson. Yes, absolutely. The design that we have proposed that you see in front of you is a beginner to intermediate level design that was done intentionally to ensure as many safekeeping of the participants as possible. 3 ways that will address liability, and obviously if this project moves forward, we'll be consulting very heavily. We already have with our solicitor as well as our insurance provider, but we'll be doing more of that. Hiring a qualified proponent to ensure that the building of the park is sound and done properly is number 1. So we used a consultant, Canadian Ramp Company, to assist us with the design. That's their expertise. Everything from looking at where drainage is to making the choice, the active choice not to do a bowl so that we have sight lines of the entire park was very important to us because that mitigates some risk associated with this amenity. Signage will be very important, so ensuring that we have ironclad signage, which we have at all of our facilities. It's no different than a user code of conduct that we have at the arena or the pool regulations that we post at the pool. There's signage about the do's and don'ts at every facility, whether it's supervised or unsupervised. And routine maintenance, so including maintenance inspections on a weekly basis with our staff, if not daily, depending on what the initial need is, as well as ongoing maintenance further down the road, so repairs that may be required as well. So those are ways that we manage the risk associated with this amenity. There's risk associated with every recreation amenity that we have. Some are more than others. So it's our job as staff to educate the public, which we certainly would do. This summer when we had the mobile skate unit, you had to wear a helmet to be in there. And certainly that would be something that we would share with the community, the benefits of that as well.
So no need for release forms or anything like that? There's nothing that these skate parks that have been up and running for 10-plus years are doing to mitigate their liability?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the councillor, most outdoor skate parks, all in Niagara, are unsupervised. They all have signage that indicate the risks associated with use of the facility and the proposed ways to mitigate those risks, i.e. strongly advise of helmet use, use at your own risk, unsupervised area, wording in that range. So that would be something that we would work on with our solicitor to make sure is installed at the park. We did do that when we relocated the mobile park out to the DeSantis property. In addition to signing an agreement with DeSantis, we also had posted signage with wording that was provided by our corporate solicitor.
Very good. Through you, Mr. Chair. So, Sarah, on page 5 of the report, you make the comment, future investment in other areas of Lincoln may be considered following an evaluation period and if supported by demonstrated community interest. Can you speak to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, if this project moves forward, we would relocate the mobile unit for the duration of its life cycle, likely to the Jordan Arena for use out there. We also worked with the consultant to identify different typologies of skate parks. So what we've proposed here is really a community skate park. It's not something we would be building another one of in the community. This would be it. However, there is an opportunity to build and promote what are called skate spots, which are significantly smaller, more manageable skate areas that are available in individual neighborhood parks. So that is something that we would pause on until we know the uptake of this park, and if there is a requirement for that, we would need to identify the need first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Michalak.
Thank you, Chair Brunei, and thank you, Sarah Ann. Great report. I love the design. I wish I was a kid again. Just curious with regards to, there's a substantial cost to this park, and I see some other wonderful things that can be done within this park as well. What's your estimation time-wise with regards to these other 4 or 5 projects that you have in line for this park as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Michalak, just to confirm, the design is not set for Serena Park, so there are no other projects identified within the park at this time. In order to answer that question, we would have to have a design. So I wouldn't want to give an estimate on how long it will take to develop the entire park until we have a concrete design, because that'll really drive what our process will be. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, we will be looking to engage with the community this summer, additionally, beyond what we've already done, and then hopefully provide a proposed design, a completed design in the fall of 2019. At that point, we would be able to identify what the project milestones would be moving forward.
So through you, Chair, the public has spoken clearly that this was a #1 priority with regards to the first step in working on this park and its facilities.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the public has spoken that this is something they would like to see for a number of years. Staff, along with the consultant, identified Serena Park as the most suitable option for placement.
Okay, and then one more thing, thank you. I had a conversation with the young presenter, Trevor. You know, good for you for coming out and being part of this process, and you did fantastic. You did really well. Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the presentation. I just want to remind, council that really what staff is seeking here is the approval design as we go into this this budget. So thank you very much for a great presentation.
Thank you.
We do need we require a mover for the motion to receive this item. Councillor Timmers, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. The staff presentation regarding the Town of Lincoln Museum and Cultural Center Development Project update. I'm sure that your presentation has nothing to do with the fact that you've emptied the room.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm hoping not. I'm hoping this is a very interesting and dynamic presentation. And I can start off by saying we do have some good news to share. One of the comments...
Excuse me, Madam Clerk. Apparently I'm being...
Through you, Mr. Chairman, so I think this screen is not working, unfortunately. We have this screen working.
Okay.
And this one here. So we will definitely do our best. And one of the comments I want to make before Ms. McKay and I start this presentation is that as recently as this past Thursday and Friday, we were given information from the federal government that is good information. I don't want to get ahead of myself in this presentation, but I do want to share much more publicly with council and the community that is here and others, some of that good news, and just to tell you some of the immediate next steps. So this is a walk-on type presentation. Typically we don't do that, but some good news to share, really an update for committee. And you'll notice there's a few background slides there. That really is just to provide some additional background information for new members of council that haven't been here and haven't partaken in a lot of the background in terms of how we got to where we are. So I will turn it over to Ms. McKay, who will take you through the beginning part of the presentation, and then I'll come in towards the end.
Thank you. So our outline is quite simple this evening. The purpose of the presentation is an information update, an update on federal funding contribution, and to share with you next steps on this exciting project. So this won't be the first time many of you are seeing this, but the project scope and initial requirements were a new and expanded museum and cultural center. We talked about the celebration of Lincoln as a heritage gateway to the region, ensuring the preservation of historical buildings on the existing site, motivating and engaging visitors by providing interactive and engaging experiences related to the existing collection, attracting new and supporting new and traveling and temporary exhibits, diversifying tourism offerings, very important to us, protecting, storing, and displaying the existing museum collection, supporting the current and future needs. This new facility allows us space to grow, growing our educational programming, including open and outdoor public space in a wonderful location of our community, and providing for minimal on-site parking. So we've talked often over the months about this project and why are museums important. They're important because they're uniquely positioned to have a tremendous impact on the lives of their citizens and those in our community through socially responsible programming, civic engagement. We generate social capital, we create healthy, vibrant, and livable communities. And much like the former presentation in parks, our cultural assets are very important to our communities. They preserve the collective memory of the community. They help shape our unique local identity. They promote tolerance and understanding, protecting our collections, furthering lifelong learning, supporting the development of youth through education programs, illuminating social issues, generating civic pride, providing public programs and volunteer opportunities, and facilitating understanding amongst diverse groups in the community. So what some of you may not know is that much like our skate park and action park, this particular project has been around for many, many years. Its inception, its initial concept started way back in 2000. And over the years, a number of master plans were done, a number of designs were done, and small steps were taken to move this project forward, like the rezoning of the site and council directing staff at the time to do a consolidated plan of the entire site, not just look at the existing structure and build onto it, and some scope change that happened. Bringing us up to what we're calling our phase 2, which is really plan and site readiness, that really started and kicked off in 2016 with the sole sourcing of VG, Venton Group, who was to do the design and the integrated project management, and then a number of key steps and key milestones that really took place. Hiring of a PM to lead this project, and some of the things that took place on the site, additional studies that were completed, archaeological work that had to be done, and then culminating with the tender documents refinement, which really happened at the end of 2017. You'll recall we came before you in the beginning of last year to talk about the project and where we were at. We were very close to finalizing the tender documents, and what we, the direction that council gave staff was to really to pause and to go away and to source additional funding and additional monies. We realized costs had dramatically changed from the original budget, and we're going to take a look at that. And so over the last year, a number of very important milestones and progress has been made towards that end. So what will our museum look like? We've got a couple of pictures here. We show the front exterior with the open courtyard that we plan to use for lots of great events and activities and expansion of the space that's inside, but also unique cultural events and activities. The back, which is always my favorite shot of the windows that overlook the site. This is a shot from the multi-purpose room, which will be looking at rentals and events and other activities, and looks out to the historic buildings, the Fry House and the schoolhouse, and overlooking the 20 Valley. The site plan, so the main ground level, and what perhaps some of the newer councillors will not know is staff in the beginning of 2017 spent an amazing amount of time visiting other museums. So we went out and we talked to other people in the industry, and we said, if you were designing a museum now, what would you do differently, and what's important to you, and what do we need to make sure we get right? So this design, this site plan that shows an entrance coming off of Main Street in Jordan, the opportunity to have a collection area, a very small sort of reception area, then a larger collection area, into a multi-purpose room which looks out to the back. These were all very deliberate choices. We worked very closely with others, learning from best practices. We worked very closely with our architects to design this, and we all came away, the museum staff and us as a team, very excited about this design. One of the things I like to boast about is the oversized elevator, which really allows us to take on bigger exhibits that have bigger cases and crates, things that, you know, you might not think of it at the time, but when we were talking to other museum professionals, they said, you know, we can't put in a bigger museum elevator now. We're stuck with the size we have, and so we have to look for places to store crates that are on our main level. They can't put them away. So this elevator takes us down to a very functional and useful lower level, which is really where the collection will be stored, where the processing will take place, where staff will be working, and of course our mechanical rooms and such. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kokopoulos, and I'll be coming back in a little bit later.
So thank you, Shannon. And, you know, I think you can see by Shannon's presentation the enthusiasm she definitely has for this project. And definitely since 2016 has been an integral part with the rest of the team in terms of providing that enthusiasm and working to get us to where we are. So a couple of the things that I want to talk to you about are construction, what we call governance, fundraising and planning for the future. And one of the comments I want to make, and Shannon highlighted that, is that when we were in front of you last year, council did highlight the need to take a pause. And I think, you know, some looked at that as a negative, but what I think we were directed to do at the time was to explore all possible options for funding and to look at how do we address some of the programs that were currently out there. There were both provincial and federal programs, and I am, you know, I'm happy to report, and we'll get to the amount in the next slide, although I think in one of the previous slides there was an indication of the amount, that we have been successful. We were successful on both counts, actually. Unfortunately, an election provincially stopped that particular ask from going forward. However, with the recent federal program that was released and an application or a grant submission of $1.1 million, we have been successful and actually have an agreement in front of us for $1 million. So you have some 2019 plans and target milestones. I'll go back to that, but I do want to highlight some of the other slides that really talk about money and why we're here today to share some good information with you. The previous confirmed funding is laid out here in front of you. In 2016, towards the end of 15, as we headed into 16, council approved $2 million in capital dollars. We have members of the Jordan Historical Museum of the 20 Volunteer Association with us this evening. That organization, that group, has promised and made a commitment to the town and to this project in the amount of $1 million. And so when we look at the previous confirmed funding, that takes us to $3 million. As I said, at that time, council directed us to pause, to spend a considerable amount of time on government advocacy and to look at other funding options. At that time, we also presented you an estimate in terms of project costs that were project costs in their totality. Typically, in the past, we had been highlighting just construction costs, but not all the other additional site costs that often go into construction. And you'll see a range here, and the reason we have a range is that last year we were in a very hot market. Oftentimes we were seeing construction projects come in a little bit higher than we anticipated, and we saw that with the Camden Fire Station. We actually don't know to the level of specificity that sometimes we know on other projects where that will come into in terms of construction costs, but we do have those Class A estimates. We do know for the most part where we think we will come in terms of those estimates. However, as I said there, we actually don't know what the market will dictate. Now, we are hearing a slowing of the market and more contractors being available, but again, until we go out and actually have those conversations, we won't know. So this is really why we're here in front of you, to share in a much more public way the fact that we have been given $1 million by the federal government through their Cultural Spaces Fund program. This comes after a lot of hard work by council. A number of you were at AMO over the last number of years and who were involved with Mayor Easton and staff in meeting with Senator Harder, meeting with the various other politicians in Ottawa to secure that $1 million. So, I want to take a slight pause there and highlight that that is a huge accomplishment for a project like this. It is a huge accomplishment under that cultural program to have an announcement like that, and it took a lot of work by a lot of people to get us to where we are. I also want to highlight $250,000 from the region of Niagara, so from Niagara Region and their waterfront investment program that we've been able to secure. As well as one of the things when we were in front of you last, you told us to go out there and talk to the community, see how much funding we could secure from the community. There are a number of asks out there, but I am happy again to report that Bench Brewing has committed and has signed on for $100,000 towards this project. So when you see from a confirmed standpoint, $1.35 million. There are a number of other asks pending, exceeding the $150,000. But I always like to be incredibly cautious and incredibly conservative when I share numbers with council. So we are planning on another $150,000 that we'll be able to hopefully announce in the immediate future. So that takes our total expected and confirmed funding to $1.5 million. Again, when we presented to you in 2018, at that time, you'll recall, our goal was hopefully to be able to raise between senior levels of government and the community $1 million. So, what's that bring our total funding to at the current time? $2 million from the town, $1 million from the Volunteer Association, $1 million from the federal government, $250,000 from Niagara Region, $100,000 from Bench Brewing, and the pending asks as I've highlighted. So I'm going to turn it over to Shannon to take you through the last few slides, and then absolutely from the perspective of council, we're here to answer any questions. We're here to address any comments you may have, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you. So we started the presentation talking about why museums are important to the community, and what we want to end with are the principles of sustainable museum operations. We know that this takes self-assessment, planning, implementation, and review on a regular basis to ensure that we're going through a journey of sustainability. It takes strong and effective leadership and governance, innovation, flexibility, and some risk-taking, organizational agility and efficiency, intelligent visioning, strategic foresight, unique value propositions. These are things that you can find in speaking to others who have been successful in the museum industry. You can find them online as best practices and things if you're starting out or if you're struggling that you need to be looking at. And then the third being ethical and social responsibility, collaboration, identification, and addressing community issues as part of a larger societal movement, creating a better quality of life. So future planning, operating and management priorities. Back in 2017, I identified a number of those when I gave you originally the concepts. You see them today, but the original concepts, and we were really excited. We kicked it off with our architect. We talked about service delivery models and governance. Those things are really going to take priority this year as we go forward. Continued collection care, and we haven't stopped since that time. Updating and cataloging our registry and our database and taking pictures. We were successful, and you probably didn't notice it because I went over it a little bit quickly, but in securing a $50,000, close to $50,000 MAP grant, which allowed us to get a camera and some equipment so we could properly take pictures of our artifacts and properly catalog and accession them. Community engagement, communications, marketing, and promotion. We've been very, very successful in our interim space at expanding our programming, at increasing our visitorship, at attracting new groups and audiences. Staff professional development, I told you then, we had staff who are very specialized in roles. We've done a lot of cross-training. All of the museum staff, one of which is here tonight, have been trained on the software. They're all learning about the museum operations. We're far too lean and too small to just have such specialization in areas. So if somebody's off or somebody takes vacation, other people need to fill in for them. We have a complement of 4 staff, one of which is a contract curatorial position. Our full-time programming and events person, Sylvia, who's in our audience this evening. We have 2 part-time but year-round museum interpreters. They work in our schoolhouse when we're on site, and we've been very successful to keep the connections that we have in the community on that educational programming, at taking that programming and turning it into a traveling programming while we've been in the interim museum. So we don't have the schoolhouse to have access to, but the interpreters have been going out to the schools and running the programs in the schools and are very busy with that, and that's fantastic for us. Volunteer development continues, and the ongoing and consistent museum funding, which even after all funds are raised for this project and the actual build of this project, we will continue to raise monies for the museum, for the collection, for new exhibits, for doing other things onto the site. So this is really the beginning and not the end, even as we build the new facility. And that's it. I want to remind you, I often quote what some of the other museums and museums association around the world are doing, but you know, the Museums Association principles that museums change lives is that every museum is different. We can all find ways of maximizing their social impact. Everyone has the right to meaningful participation in the life of the work of museum. Audiences are creators as well as consumers of knowledge. Their insights and expertise enrich and transform the museum experience of others. Active public participation changes museums for the better. Museums foster questioning, debate, and critical thinking. You'll recall we've had a book launch in our museum. We've had groups come in and meet in our museum. We've had the Masons have meetings in our museum. Good museums offer excellent experiences that meet public needs. They engage with contemporary issues. Social justice is at the heart. Museums are not neutral spaces, and museums are rooted in the places and contribute to local distinctiveness. So this is from the Museum Association, but I think it's very impactful that museums can and do change lives, and we're excited about what's going to happen as we build this new facility here in the town of Lincoln. Thank you. I guess I should go back.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Thank you very much, Mr. Kirkopoulos. Questions from council to the presenters? Councilor McPherson.
I hate being the first out of the gate. Correct me if my numbers are wrong. Back in 2015, I believe we had a project that was $3 million. And in that project, we had $2 million in the budget and $1 million through the good folks from 20 Valley Historical. And our goal at that time was to reduce the 2 million, was to go out and get various levels of government and get the community to contribute. So the numbers I'm seeing now are the 2 million is part of the number. Is that true?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, why don't I take a stab at answering that? You know, one of the comments that I didn't make, Councillor, because again, I think, you know, anytime we're looking at projects like this where we don't know what the construction industry potentially does, is that our goal, absolutely in terms of what we've been able to raise, the 1.5, anything that allows us to decrease or put back into the capital levy that erases or lowers the $2 million would be our goal. I don't want to give you numbers that are artificially too low, and so I think what we've tried to give you is a range. When we presented numbers to you last year, at that particular time, we wanted to give you a holistic view in terms of this project, not just the construction cost, which initially had come in around 2.25 million in terms of what you had seen dating back to 2014 and 15. There had been a number that was put in there for archaeological that made up the difference between the 2.25 and the 3, and that's how the 3 was initially brought in. What wasn't included that was how we were going to furnish the museum, what we were going to put in the museum, where we were going to hold things, all the site preparations that often go with these particular things. And I think we've learned on a number of projects that when we present numbers, we need to give you the whole story, not just part of it. That said, as staff and I spoke this morning, we're aware of council's desire to ensure that we're maximizing the funds that we've received, and that is what we will be doing. We will look to offset should there be any savings and should construction prices come in. We will look to offset council's capital contribution. So from that perspective, I think we're staying core to what council directed us to do last year. And again, I think you see a range before you and numbers that are holistic, but that also take into account, a budget that was set in 2014. And now as we move into 18, 19, and 20, that may have escalated just by virtue of construction price index increases that range anywhere from 3 to 5% on any given year. So we want to give you a number that you're comfortable in and that we're comfortable in, and at the same time know that should there be any savings, that those will definitely be offset in terms of the town's contribution.
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, just before you go on, Councillor McPherson, I just wanted to kind of reinforce what the CAO was saying. When I met with Shannon and Mike last week, I was given a document from our last meeting Wednesday, March 21st, 2018. So just to reinforce what Mike is saying, so at that meeting, we were given 2.5 to 2.7 in construction costs, 550,000 archaeological assessment stage 4, 260,000 architectural and engineering design, 200,000 furniture, fixtures, and equipment, FF&E, 150,000 Jordan site preparations, and 90,000 for a project management. And that total at that point was listed as 3.75 to 3.95 million. So tonight we're being given a range of 3.75 to 4.1. Is that correct, Mr. Karopoulos?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. And again, just wanting to make that escalation for that other year. Do we know where they're going to come in? Absolutely not. And our plan is when they do come in, again, I want to highlight that we've done a similar exercise with other projects, that we will be before you and share with you where those tender results are in. At the end of the day, council needs to approve that tender. And so we will be before you. And my hope is that they'll actually be under the numbers we're sharing. Again, looking at just where the state of the economy is. But I can't predetermine or hypothesize where we think we'll be. So I always want to be extremely cautious in sharing those numbers.
Carry on, Councillor McPherson.
Well, thank you, Chair Brunet. That was my next question is, the finished design and firm quote or firm, similar to what we did with the Camden Fire Hall, and that, is there a timeline for that, or what are we thinking?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, so I quickly went by this slide, and I did that to get to the money. But I'll go back to this particular slide, which lays out the...
I apologize.
No, that's okay.
I stepped out, sorry.
That's okay, Councillor. That highlights both the plans and target milestones. So we have pre-qualified some proponents. Our goal is to execute the federal agreement. They have some fairly strict timelines, so we want to get on with that and be very clear with the province that let the money start flowing to us. Issue tender documents. We anticipate that tender closing to happen in February and to be in front of you in March with those details. And, I think both you and Chair Brunet have highlighted the process and the exercise we went through with Camden. It'll be a similar process that we will endeavor to go through, again, to ensure that we deliver on the project that you expect and that we expect.
Thank you, Chair Brunet.
Any other questions? I just had a couple. So I know, Shannon, that you had it up there on a slide in terms of governance and operations as we move forward. you know, when we met last week to talk about this presentation this evening, I went and I looked at some governance for, you know, places around the Horn, like Royal Botanical Gardens, the St. Catharines Museum and Lock 3 Museum. Is it premature, or can you talk about what that governance might look like as we move forward, or is it too premature?
I would say it is premature, but we are ready to hit the ground running on making progress on that. We felt it was important to have the construction of the building started so that we can engage people with that timeline in mind of when we set to be operational and when we plan to take occupancy, because we want the new governance model to be done by then. We want the appropriate stakeholders to be involved, and we want to continue what we start, as I said, not just with the opening of the doors of the new facility, but as we move forward.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just briefly on that, and Shannon did highlight that, but, you know, the importance of engagement. We have stakeholders here this evening. We have council as important stakeholders. We have other stakeholders that aren't here this evening. So as we look at solidifying what that governance model looks like, that is not to say that the governance will change. It may evolve. We actually don't know that. I think our goal, as we have said from the beginning, is to both honor and respect our history and where we came from, but as we move forward with this particular project, to do it in a way that allows it to be sustainable, allows us to move forward, and delivers on a project that we can all be proud of moving forward. So,
thank you. I just had a couple of more quick questions. So, Councillor Russell asked a question at Sarah's presentation about lighting and budgetary restraints, and certainly, you know, for the benefit of the new councillors, like, you know, we certainly took a pause with the Camden Fire Hall, as we have taken a pause with this project. And we wanted to make sure that we were building the facility, not just looking at it through a budget lens, but making sure that we were going to have the amenities in that Camden Fire Hall that would meet us moving forward into the future. And so when I look at the Jordan area and how it looks today, and how it will look 4 or 5 years from now, in terms of the development in Jordan, and also just from a standpoint of what's changed recently with the ownership change of the Inn on the 20. And again, I had the opportunity to go to Royal Botanical Gardens for a Memorial of Life during Christmas and New Year's, and to be in that facility and to see all the different things that it can do and the things that it can offer to the community and beyond. We designed this project prior to the changes that have taken place with ownership and what's going to happen in Jordan. Are we comfortable that the design we have now meets what the needs will be years down the road? And when I talk about that, I'm talking about hosting opportunities in a facility that hopefully will be a destination place.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I think both Shannon and I probably have comments to make on this. I have had a number of conversations and what I would call preliminary negotiations with Vintage Inns in terms of co-programming and how we, you know, work together and utilize our facility and their facilities, and whether that be weddings, whether that be you know, the catering aspect of it. But in terms of the design and the nature of the design, and will allow us to be progressive and to move into the future. And you know, I think one of the comments that we've made, and before I turn it over to Shannon, is just that juxtaposition between modern, old, and new, and how that works with the street and the streetscape. And so I think those are things that we're going to continue to do. You're going to hear more about the Jordan project in the coming days, and again, how the changes to that community, to that road, and to Jordan as a whole will look like. And what that means in terms of the character and how that aligns to the museum. But we've shared the museum redevelopment initiative with all of our consultants that are looking in that area. Again, to your point, to ensure that what we're trying to build here does I think reflect the community, does reflect where we want to go in the future. So Ms. McKay may have additional comments.
Thank you. I think we've done the best with the building envelope. So the reality is, we couldn't get much bigger on building an 84 100 square foot museum, 42 being on one level, without going up much higher, which would not complement the existing streetscape. But achieving that indoor-outdoor space, both on Main Street and also at the back of the site, I don't think we could have done any better, and I'm being very, very honest when I say that with you. The site, the space inside is going to be multi-purpose. There aren't a lot of walls. There are very few walls. Shelving will be modern. Shelving will be able to roll. Shelving will fit in our oversized elevator and be able to be moved. So we will be able to use the space for other events and activities that we want to take on and move our programming around. It will be exciting.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Mr. Kirkopoulos, did you have something to add?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, just the only other comment, we have had conversations with other municipalities. Storage has always been one of those challenges that we've brought up with this project, but that other municipalities face. So there's obviously the ability if we're able to and try to facilitate storage options for other museums, other municipalities where we can potentially collect revenues, share some of those exhibits. You know, we recently had an exhibit from the ROM down. So again, we will continue to and already do look for options to share like that, look for options to generate additional revenue.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, and congratulations on the funding that we've received to date. So, seeing no further discussion, can I get a mover for the motion to receive this item? Maryston, thank you. Your pleasure on the motion? All in favor? Thank you very much. We will now consider item 7.2, PW-01-19, the Townwide Sanitary Sewer Flow Monitoring Project Award. Staff providing the presentation, please come forward. Jillian, this has no reflection on you whatsoever. Water flow and sanitary sewers is something that, what is it, Councillor Panchariva? Near and dear to your heart, but it's not sexy. But I love it. Welcome, Ms. Harris.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So today I just want to provide a bit of a presentation to support the report recommendations just on townwide flow monitoring and kind of why it is near and dear to our heart in Public Works, specifically the Environmental Services Group. So over the agenda, I will be providing just a 101 on what flow monitoring is, the benefits of flow monitoring, the importance of long-duration flow monitoring, which this project is, and then just going over some short-term flow monitoring and when it's appropriate to use these and when we have used them over the past few years as well. So what is flow monitoring? Flow monitoring is done on the sanitary sewer. We do it sometimes on storm sewers as well, but predominantly sanitary sewers. And it's a device installed within the sewer manholes. So typically it's a band within the sewer itself with a level sensor on the bottom that as the water goes over, it takes a reading and it gives us some idea of what's going on. So this is kind of a mathematical picture going with it, but what it will look like, and when you see staff installing them, you'll see a big metal band and then a piece of equipment. And the nice part of it is that typically when you're going down your roadway, you don't know when these flow monitors are in. They have very minimal impact to residents or anyone visiting with the municipality, but we get a lot of very important information. So it records key flow data within the sewer system, measuring flows, and the important part is during wet, so when we have our heavy rain events, snow melt events, items like that, and then our dry weather conditions, so when we're in the heart of a drought in kind of late January or late July, August, what is happening in the system at these different points. And then the important part with flow monitoring is we're also gathering rain data information. So that'll be information from the region. Plus, we'll also have rain gauges put in and around the areas of where we have our flow monitors as well. So the benefits to townwide flow monitoring and why it needs to be done is actually spreads out down 2 different paths, and then they actually converge back together into asset management. So the first route on top is the pollution prevention control plan and the condition assessment tied together. So in the report recommendation, I highlighted that the region is going to be undertaking a pollution prevention control plan for the Baker Road wastewater treatment plant, which all of Lincoln, our sanitary flows go to that plant. It also, the reason the region's taking it on and not the town as a whole is that Baker Road also receives flows from Smithville and Grimsby as well, or West Lincoln and Grimsby. So this will be an input into part of their PPCP, or their pollution prevention control plan. And it'll also provide us information that we can go further into for our inflow and infiltration studies. For the new councillors, I've presented a few times, and I'm pretty passionate about inflow and infiltration within our system and how we can cut that back to either allow for growth or also address some concerns with basement floodings in areas. And then just to have the best system that we're having, and more importantly, to reduce our annual costs for the treatment that the region charges us. So the less water that we're sending over to the wastewater treatment plant, the lower our costs will be. And then this also, the combination will develop our rehabilitation plan, so really build out what our 10-year plans will be, whether or not it's new systems, if we can rehab them, how they're looking, and along with the capital plans. And then the other portion that isn't as much of that a lot of people don't see is that it's also a key input into our sanitary sewer hydraulic model. And we actually look at this model on a regular basis. So anytime that there would be a business coming in and they want to have a larger amount of flow, we need this information to see if our system can handle it. Any new developments that are coming in, we're looking at our hydraulic model and seeing how this new development is going to fit in and that we're not impacting anything that's downstream. So these take into our capacity assessments and looking at developments, or is it time to do an upgrade on the pipe? So again, all of these programs all come back into our asset management plan and how it's best to manage our sewers below ground so that we're not having any impacts to residents or businesses, and that we can make this a place to grow. So the importance of long-duration flow monitoring. Long-duration flow monitoring should be completed every 5 to 10 years and or following any significant development that impacts that the flows would impact a larger area. So the town has not completed long-duration flow monitoring in just over 10 years. It was when we did the last I&I study. It's time is flying, so it was quite a while ago that was completed. So what our model would look at and the information that we have is a little out of date for long duration. It also aligns with the town's priority of climate adaptation planning, so to get a better understanding of how the system reacts to storm events. And we don't just want to know storm events of when typical short duration is, so we typically look at the spring event, so we'd want to catch the end of that snow melt when the system, or when the ground's still a little frozen, and seeing how much is going into the water. Plus we want to get those big storms that we're seeing in the spring, and then also those big thunderstorms in the fall. So we want to actually see how the system responds 365 days of the year. So it'll be a full year, and then we get an idea of every single season and every single rain event. So the long duration flows, having that information, it helps us identify priority areas for further focus and how we can improve our system, and then to trend local rainfall data in comparison to historical trends. So there's a lot of talk right now about climate adaptation, and it's a controversial statement, but we're not actually getting more rain, it's how the rain's coming that's causing our problem. So if we look at a total year, we don't have as much, but it's coming in very, very short periods and high intensity, which are causing our problem. So how are our systems responding to how the new trend in storms that we're receiving? So it's going into that, it's required for our hydraulic model development. So right now, how the calibration is done is based off of the old storms that we were seeing, so 10 plus years ago. And the longer duration of storms kind of more spread out throughout the year, not in short little intense increments. And then also to capture our seasonal flows, as I was noting. So water use just in general fluctuates during the year. So we're going to have areas of population where if we have an older demographic, obviously during the winter, there's going to be a significant lower water use within the winter months when there's traveling. During the summer, you're going to see obviously an increase in areas where it's in subdivisions where there's a high amount of kids because they're home from school and they're using the water more often, and it changes those seasonal flows. So it's also important to get this information to really impact the inflow and infiltration, because it's not as simple of you use a certain amount of water per day, it goes into the system. Anything extra is I&I. We need to actually use this information to really pinpoint what the inflow and infiltration is to do the math behind. So flow monitoring and identifying I&I. So inflow and infiltration, or I&I, as I'll use interchangeably during my presentation, is unwanted water entering this sanitary sewer system. It can either be through surface runoff or groundwater. Groundwater obviously being the stuff that we pump out through our sump pumps. Surface runoff would be from rainstorm events. So it's a significant problem across North America, and we've definitely seen a significant occurrence just within Southern Ontario and then even within Niagara region. So the benefits of reducing I&I include basement flooding, reduction of basement flooding, and the impacts that will have on our residents. Also reducing overflows to the environment, so there's an environmental benefit. Reducing the cost of collection and treatment to wastewater, that's what I was alluding to, that the region bills us based off of an average amount of wastewater that we send to the system. And then it also creates additional capacity to allow for growth to occur in areas. So we do have pockets of land that can be developed. We have some that are being developed as well, but just getting a better understanding of what that additional capacity is to allow for growth or intensification in areas. So I'm going to go back. So when we're doing our flow monitoring and identifying I&I, part of this project, and it wasn't highlighted in the report, is because it is town-wide, we will be putting in 14 flow monitors within the site, and we'll also be utilizing 5 to 7 flow monitors that the region has in place that are permanent flow monitors near the pumping stations themselves. We'll also be utilizing as many rain gauges from the region as possible. So any of their facilities have rain gauges on them, that we can get that data that cuts back in the amount of rain gauges that we have to deploy. So short-term flow monitoring in the system, this is typically done, one of the uses is subdivision flow monitoring, which we have implemented. We have it in one of our sites right now, and we'll be putting in the remainder of our subdivisions that are going in. This is more of an I&I focused and try to solve any potential I&I issues before the town assumes the infrastructure, so that we're not having these problems down the road and we're not having to go back and fix something that was a problem from day one. And then the other side of short-term flow monitoring with I&I is in areas where we're doing work right now in Jordan Station and Camden. We did do flow monitoring in the spring, summer and fall, kind of overlapped the seasons, how it went in, but just to get a better handle on what is the amount of inflow and infiltration in the system right now that we've taken care of over the past few years, some of the low-hanging fruit for I&I in the areas. And as we continue to incorporate new pilot projects, we'll also be monitoring kind of the benefits of those works on the system and the overall reduction. And then the other important part for short-term flow monitoring is when there are smaller developments or smaller subdivisions going in, doing a recalibration of that area and just kind of that little pocket and making sure that how the model shows our wastewater flows is actually accurate for the area. So this was just to provide kind of an update of why we're doing it and kind of the background on flow monitoring. So if there's any questions about the report or the presentation itself, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Jillian. Are there any questions for our Manager of Environmental Services? First up, we have Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have three questions of Jillian. The first one is on page 31 at the bottom. And it's really a clarification on the, how the contract was led. It's just, I don't quite understand it. In the second paragraph, or the second bullet, you talk about the additional quality assurance, quality control features in their response back. And it's obviously of benefit to have that extra surveillance. But I don't think I quite understand, with the other, there were 4 other companies that submitted. If that was an important feature and it wasn't included in the RFP, are they at a disadvantage when one company does supply an enhanced approach to the project?
Through you, Chair, to the Mayor. So we did highlight that it was a requirement for quality assurance and quality control and then calibration checks. Where the difference was is Cole listed it as a value added into their project to increase the frequency that they would be doing the checks. Also, there were some companies that looked at doing it remotely, where Cole was very adamant of coming into the community, taking a look at it, making sure that everything was proper, and having, again, just that those additional checks on the equipment themselves, and then also the additional checks on the data. So where it's not, where other firms may have met the basic of what was expected, Cole provided as a value added while still not including it as a hit on the overall price.
Okay, I got that now. Thank you very much. That's helpful. And on page 36, when we talk about this subject at the region and we start talking about rates, we're always talking about fixed and variable rates. And I guess the question that I have, and we're going to be talking about rate determination later on in our own budget, but I'd like to understand whether or not okay, just a minute. The I&I and controlling the amount of water that's going into the system that we don't want in the system has an impact on our fixed cost or our variable cost?
It's actually an impact on both.
Okay.
So where we have an impact on our fixed costs is that to operate the plant, they have, they obviously have more of their overall maintenance, and then their operators and that side of it, where you'll start to see a decrease is if your decrease, it's the response to major overflow events where they might, it's calculated into their overall set fixed costs, but you're going to be reducing some of the overtime requirements. You're going to be able to reduce some of the energy requirements on it that they calculate as fixed costs, where you're going to get some of your variable costs are going to be their more so their chemical costs, any additional maintenance that they might be planning on year to year at facilities. Also, it's more of a fixed cost as well, but you're not going to have to do the upgrades to the pumping stations as often when you have growth coming into the areas if you're addressing. So where we would get where the town would get the benefits of the reduction in the cost would be if because we're doing our flow monitoring and we're proving that we're reducing our I&I. That's where we would be able to come forward to the region and say we've cut back our total flows. Now you can adjust kind of the quantity and our percentage based off of the other municipalities on the overall cost if the other municipalities aren't doing it. If the other municipalities are doing it, then all in all, the fixed and the variable costs are going to go down. Are going to go down between all the municipalities. Sorry, that answer doesn't make complete sense,
Okay,
but.
Mr. Chairman,
it's-
this is maybe, it's an unreasonable question, I think. You know, just, I didn't ask you before it just came to mind when you were doing your presentation, and if you could provide us with something a little bit more, I mean, I guess more succinct, because it seems to me that when the region always says that they have these very, very high fixed costs. Okay, I've got that. But the less water we use, the higher the rates are. So that's the piece that I would like to understand better. I just want to know that, I mean, I think that's a significant impact on whether we do this or not. So if you, through you, Mr. Chair, if you would consider that, I would appreciate that. And my last question is around mitigation measures. So we've never really evolved a plan whereby we would say to new development, and let me just pick on the escarpment. So if we decided that properties on the escarpment could not have asphalted driveways, have we done any modeling at all that would tell us what that impact of water movement in those very intense and short bursts of rainfall, where would we be at in terms of our growth in the community and the viability of places like Bartlett Creek and Conkle Creek as far as their own sustainability is concerned, as we have gone forward to make those investments. So how important is that going to be? Because we really haven't done much that I know of.
So, through you, Chair, that's outside of, I'll address the question, but this is specifically for the sanitary sewer system that we're looking at right now. Where it would come in is when we look at the overall, the drainage impacts, and also within the asset management envelope of when we do our needs analysis and gap analysis and identifying what needs to be done. But it will be something that will have to be looked at when there's an updated, why can't I think of the name of it right now? The stormwater, when it's the updated drainage study is done for townwide, that would be something that would have to be considered. But for this project, it's just specifically
It's strictly.
strictly sanitary sewer flow
And doesn't
monitoring.
take into account any water that gets into that system.
No, it's completely
Okay.
separate. We actually want the surface water that's going and groundwater that's going into the sanitary sewer out and into those systems.
Yeah, right, okay, I've got it. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Russell. Madam Mayor, could you please?
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just more of a point of clarification. I'm sure it's very easy to find the data from the RFP, but I haven't had access. With the service that the costs would cover, do they maintain the actual hardware going in there? Is that all their property, or are we purchasing that property and they're going to be servicing it as part of their program in the RFP?
Through you, Chairman. So the RFP has mandated that the consultant and contractor that we hired for this project, they purchase the flow monitors, and they have to do all the maintenance on it, any modifications. If it goes down, they have to install another one. So just for some background information, we have done cost-benefit analysis before of the town purchasing their own flow monitors. Because we're not large enough, even the region kind of has a 50-50 split with ownership and contracting out as well. We don't have the in-house resources for, there's extensive calibration that has to be done on them. There's also the maintenance, there's just the actual, the amount of maintenance that would need to be done on them. It would create a significant increase to costs for us versus going out and having contractors do that. They also only last for a certain amount of years, so there's not that true benefit that we would see from purchasing, just because we are smaller. And as I noted, a lot of larger municipalities, they own a certain percentage, but then the remainder typically go out because there hits a point of that cost benefit. not being
And
there.
one quick follow-up, Mr. Chair, and what's the term of the contract?
The term is for 1 full year. So 365 days of the flow meters being in the ground.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair Brunei. Through you and to Jillian, and specific to the Jordan Camden project and the pumping station. Can you give me an update of where we're at with that, and does that help us on the mitigation side on the I&I?
Through you, Chair. I'm happy to say that I can give an update. So the region has awarded the pumping station upgrade project. There was a kickoff meeting. I went to that meeting with the region and the consultants the last week of December before the break. So that will be coupled with our overall I&I reduction. So we did see an increase to what was observed probably about 5 years ago within the Jordan area with some of the improvements that we've made from just simple cleanouts being capped and some of the downspouts being disconnected. We saw a bit of a decrease as kind of that summer went on, or that phase went on, and we had some of the downspouts being disconnected and into rain barrels. And then we'll continue monitoring that as we continue to improve. So there are some programs in place for this year to continue looking at the reduction in I&I, but coupled with the programs that we have in place, plus the monitoring that we're doing, plus what the region has, that's the concerns that we had within that area should be mitigated by about 2021. We're hoping. So that's the game plan. This year will really tell us how what the probability of that is. But the pumping station is set to go right now in the region's budget. It's designed this year with construction going later 2020.
2020.
Later 2020,
Later,
potentially
okay.
2021.
And from a uptake on the rain barrels, how do we do?
Through you, Chair, I don't remember the numbers directly off the top of my head. We were definitely
20, 220?
Yeah, I can't remember
1,000?
the percentage. 1,000, no. It was a great uptake from what we observed. I can get back to you on the percentage.
You were pleased with the?
Yes, I will.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Pachariva.
Okay, thank you, Chair Brunei. Just curious, Jillian, you've outlined the RFP and why we chose the provider we've chosen. Contingency allowance. I mean, that's a sixth of the project cost. Wondering what could possibly go wrong that we would draw on this rather hefty contingency.
Through you, Chair. Again, we hope to not have to use that amount. There is one situation where we will be using the contingency. So we will be doing the full condition assessment of our sewer system. So when we have our contractor going through and the CCTVing of our sewers are in place and the flushing is being done, we will have to take out the flow monitors and put them back in. There will likely be a additional cost from that, but the goal is to not meet that full contingency amount. Where there is a chance of an increase, and it's not as likely as if we do end up with a very, very dry year and we want to extend it out a couple months to try and take advantage of another spring to try and get the additional flow. So that would be where we would use that full amount. But it's not likely. Hopefully that will go back into our wastewater reserves.
Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Through you to staff. Just a little bit of clarification on short-term flow monitoring. What sort of timeline does that take place? What's the estimated time for a short-term flow?
Through you, Chair. Those are typically about 3 to 4 month durations for flow monitors, and you're more so looking for something very specific on that. So you're You try to time it when we get our big storm events, so you want to get 5 storms, 5 intense storms within that duration. Those are typically timed for, as I noted, either the spring or you're looking at the fall for those big thunderstorms that we typically get in the fall, or the big the rainstorms as we're getting the shifts. So that's where those would normally be focused, and we do them, and we have done a number over the past 10 years since we've done the last long-term flow monitoring as well.
And then another question, like how much weight is given to this study that, let's supposing that we have an unusually dry spring, this winter we have no snow on the ground right now, there's not going to be much of a melt should it be spring. How much weight is given to those reports? Do we leave ourselves exposed possibly by relying on a report where rainfall or snow melt was lighter than normal?
Through you, Chair. So the one benefit is that you can't actually, it's not actually possible to truly model snow melt. So not as much weight is given on the snow melt in the terms of the model itself. But even on an incredibly dry year, you're going to get at least 7 rain events. So the intent is to get 7 rain events. And then where you do a long term is because the water use itself fluctuates throughout the year. So you want to see how the population is using and producing wastewater at those 4 different seasons. So it's kind of a 2-part approach of looking at it of the rainstorms itself. You're going to get that 7 to 8 that you want to get, ideally for a true calibration. Those are going to happen. The important part is getting that dry weather diurnal pattern to be able to assess of what's going to happen. So if you have that true where you're going to get that peak of your dry weather flow when there's no rain events, and then you'll take, what will happen is the further studies will look at, and they'll take the updated design storms, and they'll put that design storm on top of on top of that dry weather flow, and that's where you see what the anticipated impacts are going to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
to you?
Much
So,
sense to
so
a
I
layperson.
can draw some graphs. I can provide that information of kind of how it does apply and how we look at the two sides of it. So the flow monitoring, as I said, looks at the 2 sides of it. So when we don't have any rain events, we want we want a portion of the year where it's dry. We want a portion in each season when it is dry so that we can get the information. And then on the other side, we do want at least 8 days spread throughout the year where we are getting some rainfall that we can, or snow melt going in if we have accurate information on the snow to be able to look at it as well. But ideally, we want those rain events.
So we do save the data from the short-term flow monitoring, and we do compare that. We would use those numbers and compare that with the long-term as well.
Yeah, we definitely take into account. So when you do a long-term study and you're looking at your models and you're looking at the full system, you also take anything. You would go back 5 to 10 years of even short-term flows to. Those are more so to validate the information that you've obtained as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair Brunei. Wow, I never thought this would be so interesting. Thank you very much, Jillian. I learned a lot tonight. When I first saw the report, I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure what this is all about, but I really have a good understanding now, and I had also had questions about the rain barrel. Some of our I live in Camden, so some of the residents up there didn't understand how in the world the rain barrels are making any difference. So I totally get it now, and I think I need to go back to them and explain it a little further. Anyway, I'll get to my question. I'm sure it's in the report, but when would it start in the spring? So it would be for a full year, and I'm assuming spring start.
Through you, Chair. Yes, it is set to start. So ideally, we want to have the flow monitors in the ground kind of end of March. That would be the ideal situation. March, Easter weekend is typical for starting long-term flow monitoring projects.
Very good. Thank you very much for the report.
Thank you very much, Jillian. A very good report. This will guide us in all our areas across the whole municipality, not just Jordan and Camden, in our I&I reduction. And as we deal with climate change and new development happening in the municipality, I think this is a great report. I just wanted to reinforce and remind new councillors that even though we are being asked to receive this and award this in 2019, this was a 2018 budget item. Thank you very much, Jillian. Being no further discussion, we now require a mover for this motion. Councillor McPherson, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda, we will consider item 7.3, PW-02-19, the Regenerative Sweeper Purchase and Award. Are there any questions from council on this report? Councilor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to probably Dave. Old unit, do we still keep it and use it? So we'd have potentially two units for a period of time?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, once we get the new one delivered, so if we get approval to purchase it tonight, we get the new one ordered, built, delivered, then we would dispose of the old one. So until such time, we will continue to use the old sweeper until we get the new sweeper.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and dispose just means it's garbage, is it? Or do we sell it?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, we sell it, and we're going to be looking at different options for disposal. I know we've heard from council in the past about exploring gov deals, all those types of avenues. So there'll be a decent salvage value from this to help offset the cost of buying a new one.
And just one, if I may, Mr. Chair, just so we're expecting the new unit now to be there in the spring when we're cleaning up the sand. Is that our target?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, so it almost takes about a year to get one delivered because you order it, it has to get manufactured. So we're hoping not that long, but just worst case. So the intent would be we're going to continue to use the old sweeper for this spring, and we'll have the new sweeper definitely for next year or late this fall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Pachariba.
Thank you, Chair Brunet. Just a question to Mr. Graham. I'm curious, Joe Johnson entered 2 tenders. Wondering what the difference might have been and if it was still below the budget amount, why not the higher one? Was that did it have a cigarette lighter or something attached that we deemed not necessary? Just curious.
Through Mr. Chairman to the councillor, good question. My understanding was it was a specification that had additional features we really didn't need. So the one before you tonight is the specification that we require.
Councillor Pachariba, thank you. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. Mr. Kirkopoulos.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I want to take a moment to introduce Ian Tasker. Ian has got his hand up there. Ian is our Manager of Transportation and Operations. For a number of you, this is probably the first time you've seen Ian. He has been with us for a few months now. Joined us late in the summer, early in the fall of last year. He and Director Graham will be coming around. We'll be meeting with all of you in the near future. But I did want to take a moment to highlight Ian. He does come to us from the city of Woodstock, where he was the Public Works supervisor there. Prior to that, he spent 15 years in the private sector and so has an extensive background in construction, brings with him a civil engineering technologist degree, and will be working alongside Dave and the team in Public Works to move our roads, transportation and operations program forward. So I know both you and he are eager to get to know each other as we move forward.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for officially introducing us to Mr. Tasker. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, we are considering item 7.4, PW-03-19, the Glass Avenue Bridge number 5 for vehicle load posting. Are there any questions from council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and it's just with regards to the posting in that particular area of the town, and it's pretty remote, and from a monitoring of these units that are going across that bridge, have we got any plan to put our bylaw out there, or to, is there, I mean, science great, but how are we holding people accountable to what's going across that bridge in that particular location?
Director Graham?
Through Mr. Chairman to the councillor, yeah, good question. I mean, what we're going to do is we're going to be doing communication outreach to the local trucking companies and let them know about the load restriction. Again, it's just going to be for 1 year, or probably 2 years by the time we rehabilitate the bridge in 2020 jointly with the City of St. Catharines. Once the bridge is rehabilitated, we can lift the posting, so it'll be probably in place for 2 years. So we're going to be letting the local trucking companies know about the new posting, looking at signage in advance, letting trucks know that it's in place. In terms of monitoring, I think it's going to be kind of word of mouth. If we know trucks are going down there, by all means, bylaws out and about, and they're very supportive in helping us with various restrictions and bylaws across the town. So, yeah, we'll be monitoring it to see if people are respecting it. So
that's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Easton.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm very pleased that this is going forward and that we have this proactive plan that is going to monitor the condition of that bridge. I was down there having a look at it, and it certainly is in some pretty interesting condition. But it is a shared job with St. Catharines, and I just want to make sure that we have an alternative plan if St. Catharines decides that they can serve Gregory Road for the few people that live up at that end by not getting involved here. And I just want to know how that discussion has gone and whether we think that there's any risk here whatsoever.
That's a great question.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the mayor, St. Catharines is very committed to getting the bridge rehabilitated, and we've been pushing for that as well. So at this point, I don't foresee any risks. St. Catharines is leading the project, actually. We're a partner with it, but they're leading the main design of it right now. So I don't anticipate that to be a concern at all at this point in time.
And I appreciate Councillor McPherson's question, because we know that there's quite a bit of activity that has, it's really been quite an evolution of activity in that area. A lot of different trucks for many different reasons, certainly over the last maybe 7-8 years. And so I think having some extra surveillance there and really understanding exactly what is happening and what could be evolving without us even knowing it is going to be worthwhile and important from a variety of perspectives. So thank you for that.
Seeing no further discussion, require a mover for this motion to move forward. Thank you, Councillor Russell. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. We have no confidential items this evening. Do we have any staff remarks? Anyone from staff? Seeing none. Any committee remarks? Seeing none, I just would like to thank everyone for this inaugural joining of Community Services and Infrastructure, and this will be a committee where we spend money. Seeing no further business, I call this meeting adjourned.